I don't think it's a crash at all. And I think it's a lot of media hype, like anything. It's clickbait. And plus, you have national forecasts, and then you have, regional, and you break it down, right? And so locally, like, each market's different. So like a suburb in the Sun Belt might feel one thing.
One of the things I appreciated you touching on earlier was it seems like there's a never-ending bombardment of negative news.
If it's important to you to buy, whether it's first-time home buy or like the ultra-luxury side, like all the considerations for it that wouldn't affect, like, for example, a first-time buyer, like you realize the seller could credit you back all the money for your down payment and more, potentially, right? Like, what's holding you back from that you may not know? So maybe take a little time to talk to an expert about some of those things, or the ultra wealthy, and how they are able to navigate high interest rates and leverage their investment portfolio, things like that.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we sit down with Mark Salmon with Compass Real Estate in South Lake Tahoe. Mark services all of Lake Tahoe, and he's been in business as a realtor for 20 years. Since 2006, he initially moved to Lake Tahoe in the 90s. He worked at the ski resorts initially, got into lumber sales, became a construction or contractor, and then got into real estate as a real estate agent, and has been doing that since 2006. So Mark is very well versed with all things Lake Tahoe housing. And today we're going to talk about whether or not Lake Tahoe is set for a crash this year in the housing market, and who's selling their houses and why in 2026. So stick around. You don't want to miss it. Mark, thank you again for joining me in studio this time instead of on the recording. So I know people are talking about a potential housing market crash and the end of Airbnb. We'll get to the Airbnb later. When you look at boots on the ground in Lake Tahoe and people talk about a crash, what are you seeing in the market right now?
I don't think it's a crash at all. And I think it's a lot of media hype, like anything. It's clickbait. And plus, you have national forecasts, and then you have, regional, and you break it down, right? And so locally, like, each market's different. So like a suburb in the Sun Belt might feel one thing, and then you have a luxury home market, second home market, finite supply like Lake Tahoe. And it's different. I think too, people, coming out of the Great Recession and still maintain a little bit of that PTSD. So, which creates a smarter market, so people pausing doesn't mean they're still buyers. They're still, are looking to purchase, but they're just taking their time with it right now and weighing in all the factors. And so it's probably better long-term for us and a stable market.
Buyers are still out there. I'm on the mortgage side. We see buyers quite a bit. Rates have been a bit of a touch and go subject depending on who you talk to. But as far as a crash goes, Tahoe is such a micro market. And given that it is more luxury and second home nature, what are you seeing in terms of the supply demand curve right now? Is it more of a seller's market? Is it more of a buyer's market?
It's a buyer's market. There's some data to support maybe more neutral, only because inventory levels are a little bit low right now. But really, it is a buyer's market. But that doesn't mean, though, that it's a catastrophe situation where we have inventories right now are, well below what we saw during the Great Recession or the build up to that and all the panic selling and so forth. And it's just not like that. In fact, a lot of sellers aren't in a financial pickle to have to move it. And so they'd rather just, we'll pause too then and see how things shake out. And so buyers don't have all that many options. And so that's keeping it more neutral. But still, obviously interest rates climbed and people still buyers are remembering the 2.5%, 3.5% days. And when you hear any news about the Fed and the possibility of rate drops, even though they don't correlate, they don't understand the difference between the Fed and the interest rate, but they just think, well, that could happen. Or maybe because they're reading those media hype articles about a potential collapse that everybody wants to buy at the very bottom, but usually, it's you never catch that perfectly.
Yeah, it's almost impossible at times, just like the stock market.
That's right.
Who's selling in Tahoe right now? I know you deal a lot with buyers and sellers. What types of situations are causing people to want to sell right now in Tahoe?
Usually, like historically, it's the same reasons, right? It's not the panic of I'm in financial distress. I've got to get out of this. I can't afford my mortgage. It's job relocation. It's a divorce situation more often than not. So it's unfortunate. Or it's the one is that I thought I would use this more, either for personal use or my family. You know, we've decided we're more ocean people. We're more desert people, whatever. Really, that's the reason. I don't know that I have a seller right now because it would sell then because we would force it to if they were in financial distress that is in that position. And that helps support the argument of this isn't a collapse right now. A lot of my investors that bought and flipped foreclosures and short sales and such, you know, I talk to those guys all the time that are down at the courthouse steps, often with cash, just aren't around. You know, I can't think of a foreclosure listed right now, at least on the South Shore, and very few around the entire Tahoe Basin.
So there's not that many quote unquote amazing deals out there that are at the courthouse steps, or there's not a whole lot of people in distress that need to get rid of things quickly, you know, maybe taking a haircut on what they could get if it could sit. What are you telling buyers in today's market? I know it's January 2026. So let's talk a little bit about what are you working through with buyers now? What are you seeing the main hurdles being, and then how are you navigating those? And then I'll ask you about what you think the market's going to go and what you see the outlook being.
Well, sometimes too, I think that buyers then when they feel like it's slipped into their favor in the market, that they become too greedy. They're looking to check 5 out of 5 boxes. And I always tell people, like, you're going to fall short on one. And those are the buyers that have been looking for 2, 3, 4 years. You know, it's like, well, if you're buying this for pure investment, if that's the missing box or what have you, or the perfect unicorn, like maybe this isn't the place for you, right? Because don't forget that Tahoe is and always will be a lifestyle purchase. Yes, we've got long-term equity gains that we've seen consistently for forever, you know, but at the same time, because you love the mountains, you want to be here. The same reason I live in Lake Tahoe. You know, the powder days we've seen the last few days coming down the lake, and it's sunny and amazing weather that you don't see in other, you know, winter destinations. And so you got to continue to remind them of that. It's like, yeah, we're going to get a good deal for sure. Let's beat it down as good as we can. Find, you know, narrow it down to a few houses, and then let's work on, you know, trying to be creative and get the price down as much as possible. But if you're looking for, again, that unicorn, man, it's just, you know, you probably never buy, unfortunately, and you're going to miss this market.
It's tough to make it penciled. If you're looking for an investment that checks every box and pencils as far as numbers wise, we're actually dealing with that. We're in contract on a place in Hawaii. Same exact thing you're talking about. Like, we want it to check every single box, but it's like, at what point do you just say, hey, this is not going to check every single box, and you just do it because that's where you want to be or that's what you want to do?
Well, 9 times out of 10, too, these folks look back. Oh, that house, remember that one over there 6 months ago or 3 months ago? Yeah, they look back and it's like, well, of course. And that was the one that and you try not to be pushy. And usually the first time they write an offer, it's like, no problem, or early in our relationship. But there is a point where it's like, look, I've been doing this a long time. You've told me your criteria. We've met it numerous times now. Now I got to start to consider, like, are you a serious buyer? Because you're looking for the impossible. And I think part of the market feeling like it potentially could collapse is that sellers are still stuck in the old pricing as well. Buyers are stuck in the old rates. Sellers are stuck in the old pricing. And a lot of times, too, some of these sellers that have decided this isn't the place for them for whatever reason, they bought in 21, 22. They haven't done anything to the property, and they don't want to lose money. And not just do they not want to lose money, but they want to make money. I'm like, look, our buyers come in pretty intelligent these days, pretty educated. No matter what platform they're using, they think they know more than you. I'm not even sure why they hired us at this point, because they come off that way. Like, I've got this figured out. And so that's the challenge. And then we start to accumulate days on market. You start to see price reductions. But reality was well below where they were listed in the first place. And had they just targeted the right price, they would have sold. And that's what I'm seeing. Houses are still selling as they should. In 2 to 4 weeks, we're in contract if they're priced appropriately for the market. So whether that's a haircut for you or not, that's not the point. That doesn't establish market value.
When you're working with a buyer, what's your approach? How do you like to advise a buyer on, they come in and they tell you, hey, we're looking to buy here. What's your approach on working with them to make sure they find exactly what they need? How do you tailor that to them?
Well, first, it's nice to know why. You know, why Tahoe? Why this particular area? Because some folks come in like, hey, I've been coming to the South Shore for 50 years. I know I want this, or whatever shore it is. Some folks are like, look, I just came, this is my first visit from Texas. I have no idea about anything. Then you got to sort through, is this pure lifestyle for you and your family? Are you looking to offset with, short-term rental income potential, something like that? Maybe you even want to have a caretaker or a full-time. So there's lots of questions to go through to sort that out. And that's the number one part. And then some windshield time and try to figure out, the best area for them and why. And
okay. So you're diving deep early on and then figuring it out from there. And then once they see certain areas. So on the seller side, what are you doing? How are you approaching a seller right now? And let me take a step back. I want this to be really valuable for whoever ends up watching this.
Mm-hmm.
If you're someone thinking of selling right now, one or two key things you really need to be thinking about when you go to sell your property in Tahoe?
Well, I would say seasonal conditions are one. Like, where's your location? Is it more like ski-centric or are you more lake-centric? For example, I've got one in Jamison Beach right now, right? Even though it's stunning, it's beautiful still in the snow. You're a short walk to the water. And so maybe that would be shown a little bit better in the summer months. And you have those crowds there, so that might be one part of it. Also just the conditions in general. And there's a lot of just volatility in the world, right? Like geopolitical concerns and things like that. And you start to wonder like, okay, that's the last of that. And then there's something new. And this isn't to be political at all, but it's like, it feels like there's not a pause in between like political issues and concerns these days. It's one after another. And people think, are we good now? Can we just kind of see how the dust settles? And is this the right time to buy or sell? And then there's something else. And that still comes up because you're looking at like the stock market. Didn't we hit an all-time high like yesterday or the day before the Dow Jones? And so you're like, okay, money's good, maybe inflation is as bad as we thought, but yet people are still pausing. It's because, well, there's just a lot of volatility in the world, I think. So that would be a consideration as a seller. Other than that, it's just, it's pricing it correctly. I think that's number one. If you're going to do this, don't tell me that I don't have to sell. I'm not in a bad financial position, so I'm not going to give my home away. That's always like a huge red flag. Like, well, I don't need the practice either. And so let's time this right. Why don't we wait that out then? Because just putting it out there at a teaser price and hoping and maybe you'll catch a fish, that's not the right way to go. So I think pricing it correctly and then obviously preparing your home correctly. I see all these houses. Go ahead.
Let's dive a little bit into that further.
Mm-hmm.
I do see some listings that they'll go in with a teaser price, or maybe they're not fully prepared to list it. Maybe they're just testing the market and it does end up sitting for a while. How does that affect a listing and a seller's bottom line if they go in and they're not right where they need to be?
Massively. I mean, there's an algorithm for this, and I try to show people, trust me, you're going to get a better price by starting lower today than you would ultimately if you start too high. And then it's a very slippery slope. And most of our buyers are coming from a market like the Bay Area, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, where they're used to things selling really, really quickly. So even though us in the mountains, like we are used to maybe it taking 3 months to get into contract, they are not. So buyers already assume at day 35 that there's a problem with this house. They need to recognize that perception from the buyer's perspective. And so it's really critical that they price it correctly and get it moved.
So does that lead to ultimately harder negotiations from the buyers, ultimately lower prices than if they would just price it lower to begin with?
Absolutely, because buyers are going to test it after you hit 90, 120 days on market. That's like, okay, you're at 2 million. Let's try 1.5 and see if they'll bite.
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting that type of stuff. Bottom feeders are now coming out. They smell a little bit of blood in the water, even though you may not be in that situation. But they're going to assume you are. Price it correctly. Because usually, too, if you watch historically listings, like it depends on the market, obviously. Like Incline Village and an upper end market, they may not move so much because there is a lot of wealth behind the seller. But in other markets like the South Shore, every 30 days, you're going to start to see some price reductions. And so people start to count on that. So it's like just price it correctly to begin with. This isn't me just trying to get my paycheck quickly. There's some math behind this.
Yeah. So what is the math that you see?
Taking less money and taking more time to do it. And it's like, if wherever you're going, there's some planning involved in that. So I wouldn't want to be a little bit more sure about our plan coming in. And then all of a sudden it's like 90 days out. Now you're shifting. Like I had this plan. I was going to do this. It didn't move. So recognize too, if you don't have to sell, then why are we going through the exercise?
Right.
But a lot of agents, there's some FOMO there, right? They want the listing. It's like, well, let's give it a shot because I could hit a home run, or I'm going to count on price reductions. But how many phone calls are you going to have with that seller to explain that and updates and, the feedback and this, that, and the other? It'd be better just for everybody. You're going to make more money. Yes, I'm going to get paid quickly, but this is the right way to move it. This is coming from a veteran agent too. I've got 20 plus years experience versus an agent that literally, if he doesn't make a paycheck this month, he can't pay his mortgage. That's not my situation. So trust what I'm telling you.
Right. Well, yeah. How do you combat that? So you've got someone that wants to list their home and they say, hey, Mark, I'm thinking about working with you. Do you go in and do you give them the blatant, honest truth and say, look, it's your high on price and it needs to come down? Or how do you approach that? Because I know there's plenty of folks that would just say, yeah, it sounds good. We'll try it and no problem. I mean, I'm sure it's dependent on each situation, but yeah, how do you personally go into conversations with sellers like that?
Brutal candor. I mean, this is how it has to be. And will I still take a listing overpriced? Sure. But a lot of times that's for longtime clients. You helped them acquire that property. You've done 3 or 4 deals for them. They want to work with you. You know their situation. Maybe they are getting a divorce. I kind of need this or whatever. So it's like, let's give it a shot. But I'm telling you right now, this is how it's going to end up either which way. Everybody else, I think they appreciate it, and you can tell them straight up. I've been in the business this long. This is where I've been in terms of sales historically and so forth. And I've bought and sold a lot of real estate myself. I have practical experience. So, you should trust what I'm saying. They usually do.
Yeah. Well, where do you see the market going into 2026? On our end, rates are slowly coming down. I don't know where they'll bottom out at. I don't see them going really, I don't know. We'll see where they end up at. The lower, the better for our business. Where do you see the market going in Tahoe in 2026? And how does it compare to 2025?
I would say it's going to be pretty flat. Maybe a slight increase because of what you just said. And hopefully, though, buyers recognize that I wouldn't wait until the rates did drop if you expect them to. Now might be the time to buy. And if you really think rates are going to drop, maybe you're looking at an ARM or something. I know that's dangerous for some people, but if you have stable income and you're comfortable, maybe a 3, 5, 7-year ARM or something like that, but get into the market now while you do have the advantage, because once rates start to drop, you're going to have more competition. Mild increase, maybe. But I don't see it going through the roof by any means. But yeah, certainly rates dropping would help.
Yeah. And we even saw, toward the end of 2024, it was roughly 2025, end of August, early September, rates did come down to where we could do no cost refinances at 5.99 or maybe even a little lower in some instances. And just the change in that first number on the rate from 6 to 5, the media went nuts. And when that happens, the amount of buyer demand increases exponentially. Hundreds of thousands of people now start perking their ears up again across the nation, of course. So that has been my take toward buyers too is, hey, if you want to buy, you're never going to go wrong buying now and then refinancing on the way down when rates do drop, because that will, in theory, increase buyer demand and prices over the long run. So I'm with you there. Let's switch to Airbnb.
Okay.
It's a big topic in South Lake Tahoe, which you are highly knowledgeable on. Airbnb had an influx of short-term rental listings throughout COVID, and now there's tax gains that you can capitalize on with Airbnbs, right? With the short-term rental bonus depreciation and things of that nature. With short-term rentals in Tahoe, we'll just say all of Tahoe, not specifically South Lake. There's a lot of micro issues that go on there. With short-term rentals overall in Tahoe, where do you see the market going as far as Airbnbs being profitable? Are they still a good buy? Kind of take this where you want it to on this.
It is. For a lot of folks, it depends on the market. I think South Shore, because it's the lowest median home values in the basin, it becomes a little bit more important for folks to offset the debt. And that's why it was interesting to see a place like Incline, the highest median home values, sort of be like the Wild West and allow unlimited vacation rentals. And then we had a ban on the South Shore. It was critically important for those folks because they're right on the edge. And what we found is like the typical usage of a second home is 6 weeks out of a year. So what does it do the other 46? And it just sits there. So why wouldn't you want that asset to be returning some? But because of like everyone's awareness of the volatility with short-term rentals, it's like I think it's increased responsibility of our owners and our property managers and so forth. So it's been a good thing. I look at it like the TRPA. Like people hate the TRPA. It's tough, like the red tape, right, to work through. But what if they weren't here in Tahoe? What would it look like? It could be a concrete jungle. That's not what we want in Tahoe.
Or the clarity of the lake could be terrible.
Yeah.
And that would destroy everything.
That's right. So the clarity of the lake is improving. It's not all TRPA, but it's improving. And so, yeah, I think, again, vacation rentals, I think they're here to stay. It's just coming up with the balance. Everything's about balance. And so they need to be regulated for sure. And people are making the right moves to do so. But yeah, otherwise, if that wasn't there, I mean, I would say 80+% of my buyers are looking for that opportunity to short-term rent. I wouldn't say that in every part of Lake Tahoe, but obviously you're seeing them in the same percentage of ownership around the lake.
Are you seeing more buyers also try to capitalize on that short-term rental bonus depreciation tax move?
Oh, absolutely.
That's a huge the tax savings with that is
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. And look, it's not that people get confused. The haters on the vacation rentals are like, these guys are trying to profit in our neighborhoods, right? It's like, no, they're really not profiting per se. Like most of them really just want to cover not even their mortgage payment, but at least they cover property taxes and insurance and some of those basic things just to help them feel better about this because there's still that opportunity cost, like especially when the stock market's thriving, like, do I really want to pull it out of that right now and invest in something that I know I'm going to lose money on? And so again, this sort of pads that a little bit, the short-term rental.
It does supplement well. And then you can still ultimately it comes down to wanting to use the property. It's not purely an investment play. Airbnbs are here to stay. I mean, I know we touched on it on the last interview. How does the ban or regulation of it, heavy regulation, affect the local economy in a place like South Lake Tahoe? What does that look like boots on the ground? So give me an example of, let's take a family that's, they're long-term locals, right? And they need a job and they need a well-paying job. What is having a ban on the top of the filter, let's say Airbnbs, how does that trickle down to a local family that needs work and stable income?
It's millions and millions of dollars. And we've done study after study, at least on the South Shore, and you present all this data and it just gets completely ignored. And there is a trickle-down effect. The only way, you have a lot of the haters, what you recognize is they probably made their money somewhere else and they've come to Tahoe and they're looking to retire, or they're retired in general. And so maybe they don't care as much. It's like they do want that peace and quiet, but that's damn near impossible in Lake Tahoe to have that and to not recognize that we have one industry around Lake Tahoe. And so we got to support it. But over-tourism's a problem too. And like I said, I need some sort of balance here. But the trickle-down effect, when you think just the construction industry alone, which is I'm a major part of, even the guy that mixes paint or runs the forklift at the local lumberyard, right? All those subcontractors all the way up. Locals can't afford those types of homes. Just the land costs and the permitting and construction the way it is today. You'd be hard-pressed to build anything for under $400 a square foot. That's why those prices start at $1 million, $1.2 million, even in the lower end markets. And so who's going to buy those homes? Folks from out of town. And they're not going to buy it potentially if they don't have that opportunity. And to your point, it's like they didn't buy this to rent it to somebody else, a local that simply can't afford their mortgage, not even close. They bought it so they could use it for personal use. And so the idea of let's rent these long term. It's like it takes away the point of the purchase altogether.
And what is limiting the inflow of tourism, short-term rentals? How does that impact, let's say, the forklift operator at the lumberyard?
Because then less people are buying, for one, and spending money in town.
Buying homes.
But also less people are visiting here because there's other destinations that allow it. We're not the only ski destination around the country. So if there's other places and they would rather rent, think about South Shore alone with the casino corridor. Do you necessarily want that when you have young kids? You don't want to be around that atmosphere. And if you're not there, there's a lot of rundown hotels and motels around Lake Tahoe. So that 2 and 3 star experience isn't going to work for them. Plus the idea of traveling with family and congregating all together. That's the big one, right? I'm coming with friends and their families or my extended family to be in one spot together, a big open, great room, and we're eating and we're cooking together, and that's part of the experience. I don't want to be confined in a 400 or 200 square foot hotel room.
So less people coming in, which means less dollars being spent in the basin, which means less income for employees in the basin, which means making it tougher to live in the basin, which means ultimately you have to move out of the basin because there's just essentially, from what I'm hearing, is the entire economy in the basin or in South Lake Tahoe ends up minimizing or diminishing just because there's not as much inflow of dollars.
You think about, the South Shore alone, you get 23,000 full-time residents, which is by far the largest population in the basin. And so how do you support 6 grocery stores with that? 2-income family making $58,000 total. So how often are they eating out? How are we supporting these local restaurants, which is where a lot of them are working, whether they're a bartender or a waiter or a hostess or what have you, a cook. It's the folks from out of town that are spending that type of money. I would ask people, locals, how often are you eating out? But yet you'll then be the guy on Nextdoor complaining that the food wasn't fresh at your local Thai restaurant. And it's like, okay, well, but then you hate tourists too. So you can't have your cake and eat it too, I mean, maybe like the recognition of, I thought, with the topic, we might jump into like, if it's important to you to buy, whether it's first-time home buy or like the ultra luxury side, like all the considerations for it that wouldn't affect, like for example, first-time buyer, like you realize the seller could credit you back all the money for your down payment and more potentially, right? Like what's holding you back from that you may not know. So maybe take a little time to talk to an expert about some of those things, or the ultra wealthy, and how they are able to navigate high interest rates and leverage their investment portfolio, things like that.
I actually just got off the phone with someone looking to buy a home in Sparks area, Reno, northern Reno, and they said they had, $15,000 to work with. It could go up to 20, and they wanted to use all of it for the down payment. And I said, okay, you're not a first-time home buyer, so you can't do 3% down. You got to be at least 5%. You could do FHA, but I would stay away from that because tremendous amount of cost for the transaction. And they said, well, they wanted their rate to be 5.5%. I said, well, with 5% down, like it's not going to be there without buying it down. And so, what does that look like? I said, well, if you can get the seller to pay for it, which there's plenty of seller credits going around nowadays just due to the market. I said, if you can get the seller to pay for it, it could make sense and we could make it happen. They're talking to Zillow Home Loans. They got a pre-approval with Zillow Home Loans, or the girl at Zillow is not going to take the time to walk you through that, right? And tell you, hey, here's a way you can structure this to meet your goals of the lower rate, but also the less out-of-pocket cash. And in the long run, it's going to end up allowing you to get your cake and eat it too, right? And so what are you seeing? That's on more of the first-time home buyer, lower price point entry. What do you see? How are you helping buyers in the luxury market strategize around where rates are at now and where sellers are positioning themselves? How are you helping buyers get things they want?
It's good, though, talking about that first-time home buyer, and this does segue into the luxury market as well, because the point is, too, in a market like this is that, there are creative ways to solve problems at any level. And you just hit on one with first-time home buyers. How many first-time home buyers do I talk to? And why aren't you buying right now? Well, I'm saving up my down payment. Did you realize that a seller could credit you enough to cover that and more? No, I had no idea. And that's why not only is it important to talk to someone like myself, longtime local in the business, and then someone like you as well, versus, to your point, Zillow, who knows where that person is in the country that they're talking to? Zero local knowledge and really no incentive to provide some of those ideas. With the ultra luxury too, it's like, well, yeah, I'm pretty heavily vested in the market that's doing well right now, but I want to buy something in Lake Tahoe. Well, do you realize that you could leverage that investment portfolio? Who are you working with? Merrill Lynch or who knows?
Pull out a margin loan, a decent rate to then use for down payment and then finance the rest. And
that could even be in the crypto world. Now we're seeing that, right? And crypto's up and down. One day it's at 113 or Bitcoin, and one day it's at 75. And they're like, I don't want to touch it. I'm heavy in it, but cash light. Now you can leverage your crypto portfolio in the same fashion. So you're not touching that. It's like I look at my just retirement accounts, and with a good financial advisor, it's like made like 23% last year. It's like, so you don't want to mess with that. I get it. But if you could leverage that instead and not have to touch it and sell off anything and still be able to acquire real estate and improve your lifestyle, which further sharpens the axe, so to speak, in your whole life and outlook and everything, business, family, you're doing something you love to do. So there are ways. And so ask those questions, get the details. And that's what makes this market different than people that were just diving in before blindly in a market that felt, couldn't be stopped.
Correct. And there was no one stopping them either.
That's the problem. Yeah, exactly. It's like, please bury yourself in.
Here's a ninja loan, no income, no job.
That's right. So we're more responsible. So is pause a concern? Why are we talking about collapse when people are just thinking more, through these situations? It's just taking more time. That's all.
One of the things I appreciated you touching on earlier was it seems like there's a never-ending bombardment of negative news. And me and my wife, we were talking about this. It was a couple nights ago. We're working on buying a place in Hawaii, and that's our dream to have something out there, and we love it. Anyways, it's been a stressful time for us. Our kid got sick and had to go to the ER. He's 8 months old. There's just a lot. We're having to move into a new rental. We rent our condo here, and then we rent a bigger one. But having to move. Anyways, there's just all these life things. And then on top of that, there's trade wars, and there's this, and there's that. And we were just talking about it. We said, look, there's so many things that go on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis across the world. But we can't stop our lives, our goals, and our dreams just because of other things that are happening outside of our control. Now, of course, there's going to be things that make markets fluctuate, and those are things you want to pay attention to, right? Like a COVID, right? It makes the stock market bottom out. It drops interest rates. Like those are needle movers, of course. But your day to day, your week to week, month to month, kind of run of the mill news, we've really just tried to block it out and not really pay attention to it because it's constantly there, and you can just flood yourself with that information if you want, and it will just make you so paralyzed to make a decision. And that's where I always try to encourage people is like, if you have a dream, just go after the dream. Who cares about all the noise? And I appreciated you touching on that earlier. So
it's not just in the real estate or finance world. It's in sports. It's in celebrities. It's in politics. And it's crazy. It's like, a legendary athlete has one bad game. Is this the last for him? Is he retiring this year? Will he ever come back? Will he ever be the same? That's the article. And because it's that clickbait again. And it's like, is the housing, market collapsing? Yeah, so dramatic. It's like, yeah, in one part of the country, it might be. I don't know for sure. But nationally, our country, or talk to an expert about getting the real facts.
Do you know what's wild, though, is that it is clickbait, but it's sad that, and I might make a clickbait title for this video. I don't know. But it's sad that we have to go to that extreme to just get people to watch something or listen to some expert advice, right? You have to draw them in with the hook and the thumbnail and the title. It all has to be dialed in to where it's like this wow factor to then just watch some great conversation, right?
It is, I just did a short reel, hired a company from Southern California, and to do an $18 million house and to think outside the box. He's like, why don't we have a professional mountain biker ride through the house on a bike and tie in some of that type of stuff? Just a wow factor. It's like, really? Okay. I mean, you're the expert on that side of things, but that's going to draw more attention to this house to do something like that. And it was amazing. The most hits I've ever got on any reel, most comments I've ever gotten. People were more interested in what was going on with that guy, and that's what got the attention.
Did you get any leads out of it?
Of course not. No, I shouldn't say it like that. A lot of us, at least myself, it's like you have tons of different marketing and advertising opportunities, and you just have to stay relevant in all of them. And even though I'm horrible with social media and I pay someone to do it, but it's just such it's once you start looking at reels and stuff on Instagram, an hour and a half goes by. It's just such a waste of time. But again, we have to put some attention towards it. You just have to. But YouTube, I'll find myself, in that perilous circle of rabbit hole of just watching videos and stuff. But sure, you're like, there's no way that shark was that big. Well, that's the clickbait. So you click on it, and 15 minutes into the video, you're like, see, this isn't the video I thought it was.
15 minutes of my life.
That's right.
Yeah.
And same thing with this, like, when you're reading through, like, what am I going to choose on CNN out of these 45 articles? It's like, you're going to grab the one that's like got that catchy tagline. And is the market really falling? Are we really going to invade Greenland? Like, I want to read about this.
Exactly. Well, circling back to creative financing, I've started thinking of a series to do about, we've done hundreds of transactions with here in Incline and just in Tahoe in general. And of course, half of our business is Reno, Carson, Gardnerville, Minden. But we have the fortunate ability to work with a lot of really savvy financial folks. And some of the things that I really appreciate that they do is, so let's say a lot of people don't even know that you could get a HELOC, home equity line of credit, on your primary residence to leverage the equity. So let's say you have a house that's worth $600,000 and you only have $300,000 on your mortgage. You could leverage it up to 80% of the value on a home equity line of credit, which is essentially a giant credit card with a way lower interest rate that's tied to your house. 80% of that would be $480,000. So you could get $480 minus the original $300,000 mortgage, $180,000 on a line of credit that you don't even have to use, but you can have it there for an emergency, for if you want to buy another property and need a down payment, for let's say you do run up a credit card bill that's at 22% and you're having a hard time paying it off. Well, why don't you just use that equity line on your house that's 6.99, get rid of the 22%, and you can pay that off over, 20 years, right? How that's just not taught. It's not common knowledge. And I was actually talking to somebody the other day. They had called in and said, hey, we heard we should refinance. We got a note from a lender, and I despise this. There's so many lenders, especially big box lenders, that will, this client, a piece of mail that said, get $50,000 cash out and lower your payment by $300 a month. So they call me. I said, yeah, you know how that works? And they're like, well, we think we do, but can you run it, can you run it by us? I'm like, yeah. So they're going to do a cash out refinance for you. And let's say they're going to pull out $65,000 on the cash out, but they're only going to give you 50 of it because you're going to pay 15 to buy your rate down enough to lower your payment $300 a month. So you're really spending $15,000. Your loan amount's going to go up 65 and you're only going to get 50. Oh, yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I said, well, how about you guys do this? I said, it's not time to refinance right now. Your rates aren't low enough. It doesn't make sense, but you should consider a home equity line of credit. And they said, well, what is that? And so I explained it. And then they said, well, yeah, we don't really need that right now. And I said, that's exactly why you should get it. And you know why? Because the banks give you a loan off your ability to repay. Right now, you have that ability. That's why you don't need the home equity line of credit. But if there's ever a day where you lose your job or you have extreme medical bills or something like that pops up to where you no longer have the ability to repay and now you do need it, now you're going to wish you had it and you can't qualify for it. So I say, go ahead and just check it out. I know this is free advice. Just check it out. I won't even do it for you. Go to Pentagon Federal Credit Union. They've got the best HELOCs. I said, okay, thank you so much. I don't know if they will, but it's things like that, just working through with buyers are like, hey, there's creative ways to go about this. If you want that second home and you've got a primary with equity in it, let's put it to work. That equity's tied up. Let's make it liquid and let's put it to work. See if the numbers make sense. And we'll run some scenarios for you.
Well, that's why it's good to ask people, that are in these fields, about that type of stuff. And your point with the credit card at 22% interest and so forth. How many people? Credit card debt is one thing I'm watching and is increasing rapidly. And 22 might be a low interest rate. And showing people, let me just write it on a napkin for you what this adjustment would be in payment. That thing's done. Plus, you've got some extra spending money, to your point, if something comes up or that you want to reinvest it. And everything is situational. But gosh, I got zero financial education from my parents.
Really?
Because they weren't educated in it.
Okay. How did you learn?
Self-taught. In the field, listening, asking questions.
School of Hard Knocks.
The School of Hard Knocks. Nothing out of a book. That's why I suffered so much in the Great Recession. But what a great lesson. I had to learn it that way. So when I tell my kids and I tell people have your kids learn financing, learn But because what I find too, it's becoming harder and harder. There's a greater separation between the lower middle class than the upper and ultra wealthy they're growing their wealth, exponentially. Then you got the rat race and everybody making 15% money, really down here. And it's like, how do you get ahead? Well, leverage, and learning financing and maybe how to borrow money or tactics like that in order to, like we just talked about, I can't buy first home. I don't have enough down payment, or I'll never get out of this credit card debt or whatever. There's always opportunities. Yeah, it took a little more risk at a young age. I'm not going to recommend it for a 70-year-old necessarily to do some of those things, but you're 28 years old and you're hungry enough to ask the questions. Like, we're going to find a way to get you into your first home, gain some equity, all the tax breaks, rapid depreciation, all those things, right? And how do we get to the next one and the next one and the next one and grow your wealth? Because it's not going to be being an employee. You might be lucky enough to have a great career. You're a doctor, you're a lawyer, or whatever, you're making good money. But if you're not, you're going to be spinning your wheels for a long time, and you're going to be paying somebody else's mortgage off for them by renting continuously.
100%. The first piece, and I talk to my friends about this a lot, and I just try to have, I like having these kind of conversations. The first piece is the income piece. If you can figure out the income and how, like, the tricks and the things you can do to increase your income, let's say from 50 grand a year to 80 grand, and then from 80 to 100, and then 100 to 120. And the next thing you know, then the piece after that's the saving piece. It doesn't matter how much money you make. If you can't save a dime, who cares? But you're right. Once people start to figure that out, and then figuring out financing, how finance works, you're right. I was talking to a CPA here in town. I had actually worked for him when I first moved to town. Saw him at the coffee shop, and he was like, "Shay, I have so many wealthy clients, and I'll tell you what, the wealthy hate to sell their assets. You know what they do instead? They leverage them. And here's why. They get tax breaks. They don't have, it continues to appreciate usually, but just learning how the game works and how money works. And that's why I am still bullish, even though it's the most expensive time in history to, in theory, buy a home, right? With prices and rates where they're at. I'm still bullish on housing because as a buyer, you could put, let's say you buy a $500,000 home and you put 5% down. That's $25,000 of your money plus, let's say, 12 in closing costs. So 25,000 plus 12,000, you're 37,000 out of pocket. That's if you get no seller credits or lender credits. 37,000 out of pocket. Now you have a $500,000 asset that over time has increased 3% a year. Your appreciation is not based on that $37,000 of input. It's based on the $500,000, which is exactly what leverage is, as you know. But that's why I like it so much better than, let's say, a stock account, because a stock account, it would be based on the $37,000. You can't just go $500,000 lying around in the stock market and say, well, you can. There's creative ways to leverage in the stock market too, but you can paint the walls, you can put in new furniture, you can put in new flooring, you can upgrade it too to where it adds more value. So I think even though it's still one of the more expensive times in history, I think it's still going to continue to be something people want to do and should do.
Yeah. And I mean, I started with $0 in my pocket and was able to go buy real estate and just talking to people.
How'd you do that?
Learning. The big one, man, surrounding yourself with smarter people than you. Look at who has made it and take the time to ask them, how? What did you do? Did you start with money? Did someone hand it down to you, or did you make it all yourself? And if you did, how? And so a buddy of mine had turned me on to Robert Kiyosaki.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I read that and then transitioned into some of his other books, like the Cash Flow Quadrant, and understanding. That's why I said that 50% money that we're working for, and recognizing too. And it's poorly written, right? It's like third grade level reading. It's so easy to breeze through, but it's just recognizing, like, leverage other people's money, and to get yourself into more of that investor mindset rather than just be an employee all your days and waiting and thinking that something's going to change. And then what happens too is then your friends maybe bought a new car, or they go on vacation or whatever. So what do? Because you've got that FOMO, you go and take out at super high interest and just worsen the situation. Makes you feel good to drive a new car, even though you're whatever the interest rate is, or take a vacation that you put on a credit card and paid 22%, and that vacation cost you 10 years to pay off. It's insane when you can have all those same things, but still invest. And ultimately the goal being to create passive income. I mean, that's the ultimate.
I would love to know how did you buy your first time, and where was it? In Tahoe?
Well, this kind of ties in the conversation of the Big Short and stated income loans and things like that. Taking some gambles early on, you learn some lessons.
0% down?
Yeah, well, private money, right?
Okay,
Hard
so
money.
private.
Yeah, that was. Or at the time, right? Like you're making $65,000 a year, and you're looking at a loan application that says I'm making $235,000. Now that wasn't smart, but you were able to get. Now, if you watch the market closely, and there was plenty of people that got out, they felt the bubble and they got out because it wasn't. Even though there was times I was borrowing money at 12% and 4 points, zero money down to build a spec home and still made six figures net profit. So as long as you got out in time, then you were good to go. But that still exists that you can borrow from other people or you're leveraging maybe your family's assets or something like that. And if you don't have that, there's still other ways to do it. To borrow that money, get under the wing of somebody, learn, save up just enough, maybe do a joint venture play. Even if you have 3% of a deal, I mean, it's not quite 100, but it's better than zero. So there's always ways, and then you create that relationship that someone sees that drive in you and they're like, yeah, I'm going to take a risk on this guy, and that's what it was. And numerous people took risks on me. I was told no many times leading up to that too, but that was helpful to see. And, just like leveraging a seller's $15,000 to cover your down payment. It's no different. And it gets you into something that you didn't think you could do otherwise.
Yeah. And you save $15,000 cash out of pocket. And now if something, learning finance, learning how money operates and the flow of it is so important. I'm such a huge advocate for that. I'll never forget, I'm a big Dallas Cowboys, or not a big Dallas Cowboys fan, very fair weather because they're not very good. But being a Dallas Cowboys fan, that Jerry Jones documentary came out, and I'll never forget the beginning of it. He's like, I didn't know much early on, but I knew how to talk people into letting me borrow their money. At one point, he was $50 million in debt trying to drill for oil, and then he finally hit, and that's when it all paid off. But yeah, he basically started with nothing, and then he just knew how to talk to people into letting him borrow their money. And
those are the best stories. And you may not have that type of charisma as a Jerry Jones, to be able to talk somebody into that.
That's massive numbers. Yeah. That's massive.
But you could find somebody that that well enough. Like he's good at that. He could help me, whatever, talk somebody into that position. But yeah, OPM, man, other people's money. That's the only way. And you're going to have to take some risks, and that's why I'm telling my kids now in their mid-20s and help them establish credit and understand that. And of course, I was able to help them financially and help with education and things like that. But I'm still pushing them now like, hey, I'm going to tell you, but I'm not going to hand it to you. And so you can take the horse to water type of thing. But I'm just saying that you guys are never going to get ahead right now. Now you have a career, you have a college education, and you're still finding yourself like, how do you possibly save without suffering? You get nothing. I can never eat out. I can never travel. I can never do these things. It's like, no. Now, why don't you hit up me? You haven't asked me once. I want to go buy a piece of land. I want to build a spec house with you. How do I do it? Why don't you give it a shot? Yeah. We were having this conversation at dinner the other night.
Yeah, what are they doing? What are they working on right now?
Well, they're busy, right? They're starting their careers because they're fresh out of college, both of them, right? And they're loving that, and that's good. And what I love is like your career. You don't necessarily have to get into something that makes a ton of money that you hate. Have a career that you're passionate about. I have one kid in digital media, and I've got another in vet. Vet tech, vet nursing, and trying to build towards a veterinarian. It's like I'm not telling you to quit doing what you love because you're fortunate to go every day and be excited about what you do. I'm just saying that you should do this off to the side because this is where your real wealth is going to come from, and you can still be passionate about your career. And every day you enjoy doing that. That's great. That's good for the soul. It's good for the heart.
I saw a post on LinkedIn from Sharon. I think his last name's Srivatsana. He's the guy that partnered with Alex Hormozy, and he built I think it's Real Broker LLC, the real estate brokerage. But it was a LinkedIn post, and he said when he was young, the light bulb turned on for him whenever he found a property. He bought it for $400,000, and he put $100,000 into it. It was other people's money he bought it with. The $100,000 was everyone else's money too to renovate it. He had other people manage the construction or the renovation, and then he sold it for $800,000. He made $300,000 on it. He didn't manage it, and it wasn't his money. And he said at that moment, that's when it happened. I knew. He's like, okay, I get how it works now. All right.
And it's out there for the taking. You just have to want it. And it's funny. I've helped people answered questions that had never built in Tahoe. The most prolific builder in South Lake Tahoe made his first call to me and asked me like what an IPE score was, and
Really?
learning the red tape of now he had been successful in other arenas.
Yeah. So he had the
Some
track
capital
record.
and some track record, some business acumen, and helped him acquire his first property. And now he is literally the largest developer in South Lake Tahoe. He builds more houses than anybody. And so it's like he has improved his position 10x of what I have. And I showed him the ropes.
Wow.
So it's funny.
Well, that goes to show you the vehicle matters too. So what do you, the vehicle.
I hear it from my wife every day. She's like, well, I hear you every day tell people how to do stuff, and you show them deals. You present them with opportunities. Are we taking advantage of all those opportunities? Like, well, honey, we are taking advantage of some opportunities, but she's right. And because I get caught up, look at the amount of hours we spend in this in industry, because that's what I'm thinking about is other people's investments and opportunities. So it's like, in reality, I have a lot more fun with development and doing those types of deals. I shouldn't be selling real estate. I should be.
You like development?
Yeah, I do. I should be looking at opportunities, not just in Tahoe, but all around the country, like I could, and work on other people's money, build syndicates, do all this stuff. And I would probably be wealthier. So why don't you do it? I don't know. It's like I got to return that phone call and answer this email and help that guy make money.
You got your head down. That's
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
That's great, man. Well, thanks again for joining. Is there any final thoughts you want to end on? I know we're coming up on about an hour here.
No, I appreciate it, man. These conversations they're enjoyable, and hopefully people get something out of it, because it's just like that guy telling me it's maybe boring to some people, but it's critically important to talk about this stuff and learn this stuff if you want to get ahead. If you want to settle for the status quo, then so be it. Don't watch information like this.
Video is not for you.
That's right. That's right.
Mark, appreciate it again, man. If anyone wants to work with Mark, TahoeSalmon.com. You'll have all the information you need there. Yeah, so appreciate it. So thanks again for coming up to Incline to hang out.